All right, y'all. For the judicial branch mini lesson segment of class each day, we're actually going to do a flipped classroom. I'm going to give you the closed notes, and you're going to listen to this a recorded version of the mini lesson to actually fill in your closed notes. So today we're starting again with the judicial branch. It is one of the three branches of Georgia's government, along with the executive and the legislative. The judicial makes up the third branch of Georgia's government. So, judicial branch. The judicial branch is the branch that interprets the state's laws and makes sure that they are applied properly and uphold the Constitution. That is the Constitution of the state of Georgia. The state's courts you've probably heard of, state court, magistrate court, they make up the judicial branch of Georgia's government. There are two main kinds of courts, two distinct types of courts. There are trial courts and appellate courts. Georgia's court system is organized into 7 levels with 2 appellate level courts and 5 trial level courts. So, what are appellate courts? Well, appellate courts look over judgments made by lower courts and they handle appeals from lower courts. So they only hear cases, let me emphasize that, they only hear cases appealed from lower courts rather than trying cases for the first time. So if you are in state court or you're in superior court, magistrate court, other courts, and you don't like the decision, let's say you were found guilty of something, your lawyer or you may want to appeal to an appellate court. So that's the process that's in place. Just remember, these are not places where when you're originally charged with something, this is not the first place. These appellate courts are not the first place that you'll have a trial. Appellate courts are supposed to make sure that trials are fair. They're supposed to make sure that they don't go against Georgia's Constitution. In Georgia, our two types of appellate courts are the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court is our highest court in the state, just like the Supreme Court of the United States is the highest court in the United States. It's made up of 7 justices that are elected to 6-year terms. It hears cases involving the constitutionality of laws, disputes over elections, death penalty convictions. If someone's convicted of a death penalty or crime and they get the death penalty, then any appeal that they have will automatically go to the Supreme Court. If there's a dispute over land, that may also wind up in the Supreme Court. The second highest court in the state is made up of 12 judges. These judges are part of the Court of Appeals. They work in panels of 3 to hear cases. So if you appeal your case to the Court of Appeals for certain crimes that you've been convicted of or certain decisions that trial courts make, initially you'll go before a panel of 3 judges. Here we see the Georgia State Supreme Court building in Atlanta. This is where the Supreme Court justices, the 7 Supreme Court justices meet to decide cases. So before you even step foot in an appellate court or before a case appears before the Supreme Court or the 12 judges that make up the appellate courts, we have trial courts. Trial courts are where people that are charged with a violation of law, you go before a judge and a jury, and they decide your guilt or innocence, if they can decide that. So usually we've all heard of a jury of our peers. So usually people elect to have their case tried before a jury of their peers. But they also, in some cases, can elect to have their case heard by just the judge. So I want to emphasize this third bullet. Trial courts hear and try cases for the first time. There are 5 trial level courts in the United States. In the state of Georgia. They are the Superior Court, the State Court, Juvenile Court, Probate Court, and Magistrate Court. Again, there are 5 trial level courts in Georgia, not the United States. They are the Superior Court, the State Court, Juvenile Court, Probate Court, and Magistrate Courts. So what do they all do? Well, superior courts can hear almost any civil or criminal case, and we'll talk about the difference between civil and criminal cases a little later. They have a judge and there is a jury. State courts fall below superior courts. State courts have jurisdiction over misdemeanor violations in civil cases. They have a judge and jury as well. Then we have juvenile courts. Juvenile courts have jurisdiction over delinquent children. If you are someone else in class or your other classmates committed some sort of crime, chances are they may go before a juvenile court. Children under 17 and deprived children under 18 go before juvenile courts. There is no jury in juvenile courts. There are judges and advocates. Probate courts. Probate courts handle administrative matters such as wills and administration of estates. There may be a jury. So if someone has left you money or someone passes away and there's some dispute over the will, that dispute would probably wind up in a probate court. And then we have magistrate courts. Magistrate courts handle small civil claims of $15,000 or less, things like bad checks less than $15,000, arrest warrants, those sorts of things go before magistrate courts. If someone fails to pay their rent, that they signed a rental agreement with an apartment for an apartment, that may go before a magistrate court as well. Here you see a chart that shows us the different levels of the Georgia court system. Again, up at the top, we have the Supreme Court. There are 7 justices that are elected on the Supreme Court. Below that, we have the Court of Appeals. Again, 12 judges that are divided into 4 divisions. Then we have the Superior Court. There are 49 circuits. That means that there are 49 areas across Georgia that have Superior Court judges assigned to them. In some cases, there's more than one. In Clark County now, I think we have 3 or 4. Then we have municipal court. There are at least 370 in Georgia. Magistrate court, there are 159. That's each one for a court for each Georgia county. Same thing with probate court, juvenile court, 159 courts across the state. And then we have state courts. There are approximately 72 state courts. Remember, Supreme Court, if you look at this, is an appellate court. Court of Appeals is an appellate court. The Superior Court, Municipal Court, Magistrate Courts, Probate Courts, Juvenile Courts, State Courts, all those are trial courts. Those are places where if you're charged with something, that's initially where you will go. You will not go to the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. You go to those after a decision has been rendered in one of the other courts. So, judges. So in all of these courts, we have judges. In some cases, judges are elected. In other cases, judges are appointed. Judges in the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, the Superior, State, and Probate Courts are elected to their positions at the state, local, and county level. Most magistrate judges are elected, but some are appointed by local legislators, while juvenile court judges are appointed by Superior Court judges. Here we have the Chief Judge of the Georgia Court of Appeals in the court's Atlanta courtroom. So we talked about courts and we talked about judges, but what about the types of criminal law or types of law? There's 2 types, criminal and civil, and it's important that you know the difference between the 2. So, trial courts oversee cases dealing with the 2 types of law, criminal law and civil law. Criminal law, just like it sounds, deals with actions that harm people in society. Examples include murder, robbery, DUI. Civil law, on the other hand, handles private disputes where one person or group says that another person or group has somehow done them wrong. Examples include divorce, contracts, property ownership, injuries, those sorts of things. So if you look at this here, what we see on the left is civil law. If you're found liable, the defendant has to compensate the plaintiff, versus criminal law, where if you're found guilty, the accused can be incarcerated and fined. So it's important to know the difference between those 2. We have civil, you have to compensate the plaintiff or the person who brought the charges against you, where criminal, if you're found guilty, you're accused of a crime, you can be incarcerated and you can be fined.